The whole issue of Flight 93 basically boils down to one question. If you just happened to drive by and someone told you that a Boeing 757 has just crashed into this hole and most of the 100-ton airliner is now buried under the ground, would you believe it or not? This is the kind of puzzlement the people from Shanksville experienced when they arrived on the crash site of Flight 93.
We drove back that road, and where the road ended, that's where the plane was. And I mean, the only thing I could tell, I get out, like I said, I heard this thing, I felt the explosion, saw the fireball, and I get up there and I'm thinking, where is it? Just debris, small pieces of debris, and the trees were singed and burning, it was just smoldering.
Nothing. It was just little pieces. There was nothing to actually, like a door or window or anything. You couldn't really, it was just little pieces of shrapnel everywhere.
So what's that right there? Over in here.
TV reporters were also at a loss when faced with the idea that an actual plane had just crashed on that site.
At first I wasn't even sure that this was, that these were pieces of the plane. They're so small, and it's indistinguishable. You can't tell whether it's a piece of the fuselage or a piece of the seats. You don't know what it is.
Chris Kanicki, he's a photographer. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. From where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
It's really all you see is a large crater in the ground and just tiny, tiny bits of debris.
Alert also went out to Somerset County Coroner Wallace Miller. He hurried to the scene, an abandoned strip mine. When he arrived, he couldn't believe his eyes.
It looked like someone had gouged about a 10-foot wide, 10-foot deep trough through the strip mine area. But when you looked in, it was just covered with dirt. There was nothing there that you could really say was an airplane.
Dennis Roddy was the editor-in-chief of the Pittsburgh Gazette.
Airplane debris? Nothing I could identify.
Possibly the most disconcerted of all was the mayor of Shanksville, Ernie Stuhl.
Ja, mein Schwager und ein guter Freund von mir waren die Ersten hier. Sie haben in Shanksville an einer Straßenecke gestanden und sich unterhalten. Ihr Wagen stand gleich in der Nähe und so waren sie die Ersten hier. Dann kam erst die Feuerwehr. Alle waren wie vor den Kopf gestoßen, weil sie zu einem Flugzeugabsturz gerufen wurden. Aber da war kein Flugzeug. Kein Flugzeug. Sie wurden hier zu der Unfallstelle geschickt und da war kein Flugzeug? Nein, da war nichts. Nur dieses Loch. Das ist es, was Sie sahen. Ich dachte immer, das sei die Absturzstelle. Das ist sie, aber da ist nichts zu sehen.
It's in that hole, says the FBI, that most of the airplane lays literally buried in the ground. Much of the plane and its contents were found beneath the soft dirt, states the FBI's website. Evidence technicians found the flight data recorder about 12 feet below the surface and the cockpit voice recorder about 25 feet deep. Since the two black boxes are located in the tail of the plane, one must conclude that also the cockpit, most of the fuselage, the passengers' seats and bodies, and their belongings somehow managed to get buried deep underground. The only ones who don't seem to have a problem with this explanation are the debunkers.
We have this idea that when planes crash, they crack in half and there's this dramatic burned wreckage. That's what happens when planes crash at very low speeds, usually on approach or takeoff from an airport. This plane was flying straight down. It was approaching the speed of sound. It would have if it had gone much farther. And it penetrated into soft ground with incredible velocity.
Ma qui la caduta è stata diversa, l'aereo era quasi verticale quando si è schiantato a una velocità altissima, l'aereo si schiaccia quasi nel terreno, produce un cratere piccolo e quello che rimane va a finire quasi tutto nel terreno.
First of all, it isn't true that the plane hit the ground almost vertically. According to the NTSB flight path, the 757 hit the ground at an angle of about 45 degrees. This fact alone removes much of the exceptionality the debunkers would like to attach to this crash. But even if it were true that the plane fell almost vertically, how could the hole have closed itself up even before the first responders arrived? This is not mud. This is your typical hard country soil. When a plane crashes and makes a hole in the ground, the hole remains open and quite visible from above. This, for example, is the crater caused by Flight Pan Am 103 when it crashed in Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988. It's true that the 747, the plane that crashed in Lockerbie, is larger than a 757, but it's also true that the Pan Am flight broke up in mid-air due to an explosion, and that only part of the plane caused the crater seen in the photographs. Let's compare the size of the Lockerbie crater, several blocks wide, with the one in Shanksville, several feet wide. This is the size of a human being next to the Lockerbie crater. This is the size of a human being next to the Shanksville crater. These are people looking down into the Lockerbie crater. These are people standing by the Shanksville crater after the accident. Compare the size of a car with the Lockerbie crater and the size of a small truck with the crater in Shanksville. This is the largest chunk of the Pan Am flight that was found near Lockerbie. It's almost half the front part of the fuselage and includes part of the cockpit. This is the largest piece of debris we have ever seen from Shanksville. It's a piece of fuselage a bit wider than 2 passenger windows in a picture released 5 years after the event. This is an engine from Pan Am Flight 103 which plunged to the ground at a location near Lockerbie. This, we are told, is an engine from Flight 93, which was supposedly excavated from the hole in Shanksville. These are images from different crashes, showing that the tail of the plane almost always survives. It does so because it's normally the last part of the plane impacting the terrain, when most of the kinetic energy has already been dissipated to the ground. This is the mark on the ground that was supposedly left by the tail of Flight 93 before it vanished into thin air. These are the chunks of the wings that are normally found after a plane crash. These are the marks that the wings of the plane allegedly left on the ground in Shanksville before vanishing with everything else into thin air. And this is the center of the hole, which is supposed to have swallowed practically the whole fuselage. But this is where the official story of the crash becomes truly fascinating. According to the FBI, after 2 weeks of excavation in Shanksville, 95% of the plane had been recovered. A Boeing 757 weighs roughly 100 tons. A mid-sized car weighs about 2,500 pounds, a ton and a half. This means that, according to the FBI, the equivalent of at least 50 to 60 cars was actually excavated from the ground. Question: can you explain how most of an airplane weighing 100 tons could end up buried deep underground in a hole that closed itself up before the first responders arrived? But even if it were true that 95% of the plane has been recovered, where is it? Why have we never been shown it? When a controversial accident happens, all efforts are made to recover as many pieces of the plane as possible. These, for example, are the remains of the flight from Lockerbie, which have been pieced together in a hangar. These are the remains of TWA 800, the flight that crashed in the ocean near Long Island in July 1996. These are the remains of flight Itavia 870, which crashed in unclear circumstances near Ustica, Italy in 1980. Why wasn't the same thing done with United 93? Given the controversy on the absence of debris, coupled with the rumors of a possible shoot-down, it would have been the perfect way to put all the conspiracy theories to rest. Instead, we are told, all the recovered parts of the plane have been sequestered by the FBI, and no one has ever been able to see them. As far as we know, Flight 93 might have never crashed in Shanksville to begin with.